Great. Welcome, everyone. It's so wonderful to have all of you joining us, the Canadian Psychedelic Association community, as well as all the other communities who are joining us across Canada, across US, as well as globally. It's my pleasure and honor to host this webinar for us this afternoon, and we're ready to just jump in. I am so honored to be with these incredible individuals who have made time out of their busy schedules to be with us today. And yes, they each bring their own wonderful knowledge and expertise to the field of cannabis. So, my first and foremost, my name is Salome Tabrizi. I'm one of the founding members of the CPA, and it's again my honor to introduce our panel on cannabis, cancer, and organic cultivation. My intention today is to cover the medical side of cannabis and cancer, as well as some of the research, also go into the cultivation side, and if we have some time at the end, to cover some industry updates in Canada as well as the US. As we know, things are always changing in regards to cannabis, and also just have some time to maybe talk about the fires and how they have affected the cannabis farms. I know Josh and Kelly are deeply rooted with the community that's down the West Coast, and I would love to just hear how things are going for those members of our community. So without further ado, I'll allow each of our panelists to introduce themselves. First and foremost, I'd like to ask Dr. Liana Standish to introduce herself. Please share a little bit about what you're currently working on, and also your own personal professional journey with cannabis. Why are you so passionate about this plant?
Oh, great question. My name's Leanna Standish. I'm a neuroscientist interested in consciousness. And from there, my interest in ayahuasca research emerged. My interest in cannabis has been lifelong. And when I'm in a good mood, I often say that cannabis is my power animal. And I am also a physician that's been working with cancer patients for many, many years. And um, the emerging data about the role of cannabis in not only just mitigating the side effects of chemotherapy, but also as having anti-tumor activity has really propelled me to incorporate cannabis therapy in the institute that Dr. Agarwal and I started 2 years ago, called the Ames Institute in Seattle, where we're combining in our oncology program cannabis therapy as well as psychedelic therapy using ketamine, advanced plant medicine IV therapies, and Ames Institute is also the site where we plan to do the first US ayahuasca clinical trial.
Fantastic. And it'll be great to jump in a little bit more in regards to the holistic plant medicine healing that you have, both you and Sunila are visionaries in, as far as the clinic, and really an example of the clinic, a clinic of the future. Thank you, Liana. So great to have you with us. Next, I'll go to our other lady on the panel. Kelly, please introduce yourself.
My name is Kelly, and I'm a co-founder of Dragonfly Earth Medicine with my partner Josh of almost 30 years. We also started the DEM Pure certification, which is a regenerative certification, which is rooted in cannabis, but also extends to other regenerative businesses and education forums that support cannabis as well as plant medicine in making its way on an international level for healing medicine. My journey with cannabis has been my entire adult life. And, you know, it's my life goal to give a rightful voice for this incredible medicine, this master plant, both in cultivation as well as in community action forward, and how we can bring this plant into, you know, a much higher vibration to do the healing action which it was, you know, meant to do here on the planet. So my decision with this plant over 30 years.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kelly. And
And I'm Josh.
perfect. Go ahead, Josh.
Okay, thank you to everyone who came today. I want to say also it's an honor to be in this space with you. Um, my journey with cannabis has been lifelong. Through my whole life, I've been surrounded by it, and in my adult life, I just feel like cannabis is one of those master plants that can save the world. It can save the world through consciousness. It can save the world through um, combining with other herbal medicine, and also the way that it's cultivated. So it's our intention to keep cannabis sacred and not have it be changed away from plant medicine. We want to create that same sacred plant medicine connection that we've always evolved with, and that it's our intention to keep that, to create that space with the farms that we work with, and also with the farm that we have here.
Fantastic. Thank you, Josh. And Sunil, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Sunil Agarwal. I am a physician who practices palliative care and rehabilitation medicine. I have an integrative focus. My interest in cannabis goes back to college, when I was experimenting with it myself and realized that I was completely misled by the teachings that I took from all of my higher education and high school. And I went to top math and science schools and things like that, and it was amazing to me how wrong the policies were. So I was very interested in the trying to clear its name in my public health work. So my training is in medical geography, so I look at how humans interact with their environment and how we make medicine systems out of that, or how the environmental relationship causes ill health. And I'm really interested in cannabis as a spiritual health and well-being vehicle, and of course as physical health, social health, and all the other domains of health. But the spiritual health was the unique one that puts it in the class of other entheogenic plants and fungi and other substances. So that's kind of how I'm interested in cannabis now, and I work with it with my patients and try to integrate it into their symptom management, or de-prescribing other medicines like for pain or nausea or anxiety, and try to also find ways to work with therapists who want to do cannabis-assisted psychotherapy, so help clear patients so that they're in the right setting and the right medically appropriate to do something like that. And working with Dr. Standish and a team of naturopathic physicians, an integrative medicine team at Ames Institute, which we started 2 years ago. We've really been able to, and we have a cannabis education team. We're doing a lot to kind of normalize cannabis as part of a integrative holistic treatment plan, and incorporate also things like Dr. Standish was mentioning, ketamine. I've also been working on access to psilocybin therapy for end-of-life patients here in Washington State under the Right to Try law. And so I have an interest in just these class of medicines, and cannabis is amazingly the gateway. It was the gateway into this space for me. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sunil. And, the way that I can describe each one of you coming here together is that for me, you guys are supernatural. You've really hacked the human potential space. And it's amazing to see all of you, giving back in service to your patients, to your clients, to the farms, to the communities. And so, and before we go into the questions, I just wanted to let everyone who's watching right now to please introduce yourselves in the Facebook Live chat. Please give us hearts and likes so that more of this video can be presented to others in the community. And also, please write your questions as we go through the to the discussion this afternoon. Please share maybe some of your insights, questions, and your own personal stories with cannabis. We'd love to hear. Okay, so why don't we start with maybe just a simple case study? So Sunil and Liana, if you could just share maybe some of the most common cases of cancer that you see coming into your clinic, and run us through a bit of the protocol. Is it a 3-month protocol? Do you work with people longer? What does that usually look like?
No, maybe I'll start. I have a case in mind. There is a tiny bit of evidence that cannabis might be a useful therapy in a kind of brain cancer called glioblastoma multiforme. And my father died of that disease, and I have been very interested in figuring out what to do about patients with that problem, because most people die within 6 months after diagnosis, despite surgery and chemoradiation. So one of the things that we've been following, and mostly at the lead of Dr. Agarwal, is the literature. So there is one study suggesting that THC has some benefit in prolonging lifespan in people with brain cancer. So we have a patient, Sunil and I started working with him in August 2018. So he's now survived 2.2 years, which sadly is actually pretty good in that particular disease. And cannabis has been central to his protocol. The way that it works at Ames Institute is Seattle Medical Marijuana Consulting has an office here, and Mary Brown in particular, who's the leader of that organization, will sit down with patients and their families and talk about which products, how many milligrams, and it's not just CBD and THC, but it's also CBG and CBN, have a role in cancer therapy. And then what Sunil and I are doing here is we want to measure the impact of cannabis therapy among other things that we do for cancer patients. So we have what's called an outcome study to measure not only quality of life, but length of life in our cancer patients. So that's one case. I'm sure Sunil has another good one.
Oh yeah, that's excellent, Dr. Standish. Leanna. Let me also add that we're interested in just taking this one case. We know that there's an important role for cannabis in anti-tumor effects, like in glioblastoma and other tumors. It seems like there's a role in direct anti-cancer effects to cause apoptosis, to maybe in other solid tumors reduce the blood vessel supply to a solid tumor, reduce the ability for that tumor to make wings and spread to other areas by invading the nearby tissue. So, but part of the key element of that is actually getting your immune system to be involved in the job to fight, to help the body clear the tumor, just like your immune system helps you when you're fighting infections or other insults that threaten the host. So we're interested in boosting that immune system, and in addition to giving integrative oncologic support, seeing how cannabis plays a role with that, making sure that patients have the right paperwork, authorization forms, the right good advice integrated in with the medical team. We try to correspond with the oncologists and let them know, hey, this is what we're thinking. This is the rationale that we have, and so then once that relationship is established, we can also look at some deeper layers of what has it been like facing this diagnosis? How has it impacted your sleep? What kind of existential issues have come up that sort of you buried and hadn't dealt with until this point? And is this a good time now to open that up? Yes, we think so. I mean, and that's where our other therapies come in. So I just wanted to kind of deepen that. Many of our patients come at different stages of cancer, really. In this patient's case, they might have a recurrence of a tumor. Or in some cases, we're getting patients even at the very beginning. They had a diagnosis of cancer like a week ago. So it's also a way to kind of, okay, here's how you can integrate cannabis in and other therapies when you're undergoing chemotherapy or radiation or other modalities that might help. And is there a way we can reduce the severity of the impact, the negative side effects of those treatments? So that's what we're looking at. And I should caution that not all cannabis is good for all cancer types. There's definitely concerns out there that hormonally sensitive cancers had mitigate the pro-hormonal active effects of THC in some forms of breast cancer? What is the impact of immunotherapy? When you're getting immunotherapy, you want to have a certain inflammatory response for the body to fight the cancer. But if cannabis sort of modulates that, is there a way that the dose should be reduced so it's not interfering with that therapy? So there's still some open questions, and that's why we call this advanced integrative medicine, and we're trying to do research to find out what's the right thing.
But I just want to add one more thing. And this has given me so much kind of personal pleasure at our clinic is watching Mary Brown tell patients how to make their own cannabis. It's, as you know, buying these products in the pot stores is enormously expensive. And a lot of our patients are just broke just from their medical bills. So what Mary Brown has done is be able to teach people how to buy really beautiful flower, a specific strain, cultivar, I guess I should say, and then tell them how to make that in a magic butter maker and make their own medicine. And then we have a collaboration with a clinic here near Seattle called Medicine Creek Analytics that can tell us exactly how many milligrams of all the cannabinoids and the terpenes are in there, so that eventually doctors will be able to say, for this particular patient, for this particular condition, we need this and this and this and this and this and this and this in a profile. And we're not quite there yet, but that's the future of this beautiful field.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Leanna. So from what I heard, you're talking a lot around the entourage effect, right? Looking at over 100 cannabinoids and each of them coming and playing a role with the terpenes, and really seeing we're at the tip of the iceberg, I also feel, of this massive research finding in regards to the synergistic effects of the cannabinoids. And Sunil, thank you so much for also explaining, what happens biologically with the anti-cancer effects of cancer, whether it's blood flow or just communication between the cancer cells, which are stopped, and the immune system. So Josh and Kelly, I know you guys, you're so amazing because you work with the plant from seed to the full function, whether it's the oils, whether it's distillate CBD. So tell us a little bit about clients that you have worked with, maybe some of the cases. And I know, Kelly, this is quite tender in your heart because your mom was actually supported by you towards the end of her life, as well as the immune discussion and how important that is.
Well, first of all, I really want to be incredibly thankful for you two, because what's happening here is, well, you three, but these case studies with patients is, we're seeing this incredible actualization of the work and the medicine that we've been putting out, for the past 30 years, a lot of trials and tests. Oh, geez, well, maybe that was too much. Oh, maybe that wasn't enough. We're seeing a reduction in tumors. Okay, well, a lot of these trials and tribulations, on more of a homemade, backwoods, illegal setting of cannabis, now to have you all take that and put it into case studies, put it into, data and data banks of what's helping and what different types of cancer is. It brings me a sense of freedom that I want to, have tears in my eyes. So first of all, I really want to thank you, because it really, I know I said this, but it actualizes pretty much all of the work that we've been putting forward with this plant. So it's incredibly invaluable. And like I said, we've been working with patients for a very long time, making RSOs, making salves, oils, butters. We work with a lot of animals who have late stage cancer. And we have seen throughout all of the years of making medicine, we've seen miracles, really nothing shy of total miracles. So people come to us not at the beginning of their cancer, because we were, the prohibition was so heavy on cannabis. People don't necessarily feel good about talking about it, and then going to talk to somebody who's illegally cultivating it, is a big step for them, and is sort of going against that ingrained Just Say No campaign that we all really bought into. So we usually get patients at a very late stage 4. They're already in palliative care. We get a lot of children who the doctors have said, hey, we've given you every pharmaceutical. We've done every treatment that we can. There's nothing else that we can do with you. So then those are the patients that we get. And we've seen, children who have been having seizures all day long, on our medicine, which so many people hear, one day of utilizing a high CBD, low THC with a tremendous amount of medicinal mushrooms in it. We always mix mycology with cannabis. So all of our formulations are medicinal mushrooms, adaptogenic Chinese herbs that go along with the medicinal mushrooms, as well as cannabis. And we've definitely seen a huge raise in the type of maladies that we can reach with this combination of cannabis and medicinal mushrooms. We've done just cannabis before, and I think that I would say we're able to treat much faster, as well as we're seeing curatives much faster. So, treating people stage 4 breast cancer to completely gone, leukemia. We've had a lot of leukemia patients that have palliative with a lot of body sores that we've been able to treat with both salve as well as the cannabis. But I can say that when we were just working with cannabis, we were not hearing the tremendous success stories in the way that we're hearing it with the combining of the mycology or medicinal mushrooms and cannabis. And you might want to add something. I guess one more thing is that I've been working with women and children. I have a naturopathic medicine background, as well as I'm a registered midwife. So I've been using cannabis in my practice from the very beginning with both infants, as well as neonatal care, prenatal care, postnatal care for depression, for women that very young moms. I could go on and on. It's been incredibly helpful in my practice for that as well.
I feel she covered everything, and I can continue later.
And there's so much more, but this is great. So I'll let somebody
Part
else
of
talk.
the magic is the power of growing this medicine in living soils, and we can talk about that when we get more into the cultivation and why that's important.
Yeah,
so.
and the medicine itself, and why starting with the cultivar. And what type of cultivar, and you mentioned it, Salome, very briefly, is the entourage effect, and why what we're cultivating here is full spectrum, full cannabinoid, full terpene, rich cultivars. We feel that that's very important to the access of medicine for, healing people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. So next, Liana, let's talk a little bit. Let me pose the question, and then please, you can start. Let's talk a little bit as well about dosing. I know it's case dependent, and of course it's a build up, but please share a bit about what that looks like for possibly different cancers and different cultivars.
Oh, you want me to talk about that? Well, I'm sure Kelly and Josh know way more about that than I do. And I just wanted to thank you, Kelly and Josh, for the agricultural work that has produced these wonderful cultivars that now we're using in the clinical setting. Some patients need dance halls, some people need sour diesel, and and et cetera. And getting that down, we have to have the beautiful medicines. But my question to you guys is, which mushrooms are you using? And are you using fruiting bodies and mycelium, either or? And are you growing them yourselves, and how do you do it?
We use for the mushrooms. We have access to virgin forests and in the area that we live in the Kootenays of British Columbia. So we have a tremendous amount of fruiting body polypores like Fomitopsis pinicola, which is the red-belted conch. We use the Amadou, which is the Fomitopsis Fomus fomentarius. That's the Amadou, and that's the one that like the mushroom hats are made of that you've seen at Amadou. It's one of the 3 mushrooms that the Iceman had around its neck, which was the birch polypore, the chaga, and the Amadou. So we get a lot of mushrooms off of the birch tree, which is filled with betulinic acid and is one of the most medicinal trees in our area. So we'll find red-belted conch coming off of birch trees. We'll also find red-belted conch coming off of hemlocks, pines, and firs. And the red-belted conch is not really studied in Western medicine against cancer. There are studies that you can find out there, but there is reasons to believe that it may be very powerful and very similar to the reishi mushroom, and in some cases maybe surpass the reishi mushroom. And again, we live near a very large wilderness area, so we think that clean environment has a lot to do with the power of the mushrooms. We also will find chaga, Inonotus obliquus. We'll find chaga, and we will find artist conch, Ganoderma aplanatum. And those are the main ones. Turkey tail would be the last one that we would probably find as a fruiting body wild in our environment, which we would then temperature. And then we also use mycelium priority fruiting body powders where we can't get it to get like lion's mane, agarikon, cordyceps,
and then the 4 colors of reishi we're able to access that way as well.
Those are the ones we fuse. Did you want to?
And then we add the Chinese adaptogenic herbs, which is the fo tea. We add ashwagandha, and then of course the Chinese licorice to sort of give a passageway for everything to be able to be easily absorbed.
And 2 last things: we use the roots and seeds. So we intentionally pull the roots up of the plant, and we dry that out, and we also make a large amount of oil to then preserve and make into caps. And that's how we get it to people, is through gel caps.
Just to add, one of our core breast cancer therapies down here at Ames is turkey tail mushroom. Seattle did some of the basic research on that many years ago. So that's fascinating. I love what you're doing.
I feel like this is a great start of a connection. Great question, Leanna. Thank you so much, Josh and Kelly. So let's go back to dose then. Let's say a patient comes in with maybe starting with stage 1 or stage 2 cancer. Sunil, if you could touch.
Yeah, this is still an open question, at least in terms of like what's bubbling up in the cancer literature. I had a chance to review all of the cannabis and cancer literature when I was at the NIH. I spent a year during my fellowship there and worked with the National Cancer Institute, which is the largest cancer research center in the world, most well-funded. And, there was all kinds of literature to review and look at. And there was only one study that had been done or was being done and finally got published that had that showed a signal in a controlled clinical trial. And Dr. Standish earlier made mention of the glioblastoma multiforme study, where you had a control group and you had a group that was using a cannabis preparation, whose dose was known, and then they tried to let them take a few sprays a day. It was a tincture 1-to-1 of a nabiximols, which is a liquid CO2 extraction of two varieties in cannabis, type 1 cannabis, high THC, and a type 3 cannabis, high CBD. And they do liquid CO2 extraction grown in greenhouses, and then they combine it together in a glycerin tincture. And 40 milligrams of that tincture, over the course of a day, spread out, is where they saw a signal when their GBM progression was like survival in the cohort that had that much was still being mapped out after 2 years, and still the final of that report still hasn't been done. But that was when they published a signal at that dose. So that's like one like factual. The other group didn't take that. But cannabinoid dosing is so, even if we're not even forgetting about cancer, if I was talking to you about pain, like there's a huge variation because people do have different set points with endocannabinoid tone, what their needs are, and there's a way you approach where sometimes you want to start with CBD and then layer in THC, and of course these other minor cannabinoids that we were talking about, CBG, which is the mother precursor to THC and CBD in the plant. So there's different rules of thumb and strategies around that, which I'm a little bit more familiar with. Like, if you're trying to do CBD dosing, people, if you have a whole plant full spectrum tincture, somewhere around 0.5 to 1 milligram per kilogram per day, whatever your body weight is in kgs, you figure multiply it by half all the way to your full weight, and that's probably a reasonable target range. There's a great paper that Dr. Russo and a doctor there in Canada, whose name I'm going to blank right now, but she's an amazing physician who wrote a rational guidelines for medical cannabis dosing, practical guidelines for medical cannabis dosing administration. And so these are the rules of thumb that we work with in symptom control. When it comes to oncologic care, and of course in oncology there's tons of symptoms to manage too, so this is very relevant because people won't do other therapies unless they know that they're not going to be going through quite a bit of a torture in terms of pain or nausea. So I think there's something to be said for that. Sometimes treating the constellation of symptoms, you do sleep better, you do have your immune system will be stronger, and maybe that's sort of the piece that cannabis is holding. And then the other medicines that you guys were talking about, these amazing mycotherapies and Chinese herbs and so many other things. Dr. Standish has done research on curcumin and so many other agents. Sometimes you kind of there was a time where with Rick Simpson, your Canadian brethren, it was like everything is like, can we do everything with one plant? And I just don't know of any medicine systems, like you mentioned the Iceman. Even he had three different plants, right? 3 different fungi. So it's important to try to not put everything on one medicine, that you kind of use a family of them to have the synergistic effect. And that's where we're still open questions. So that's kind of the best I can do in terms of dosing.
Excellent. Thank you. Liana, yeah, go ahead, please.
I have learned at with Sunil in the clinic, and I have something like, if a physician asks me like, well, how do you do dosing? So second day the clinic was open, we had a woman come in her late 40s with terrible trigeminal neuralgia and excruciating pain that made her really unable to work. She's really disabled from this shooting pain in her face. And Sunil prescribed 25 milligrams of CBD 3 times a day. And her pain went down significantly. And that's all she's had to do for the last 2 years. And that experience, as a doctor, when you see something works so beautifully. So what I do now is I start with 25 milligrams of CBD. And then the therapeutic range, some of our patients are up to 100 milligrams. And then it always needs to have a little bit of THC. We know that from all the literature. But then what I'm doing with patients that need THC, I'll give them 1 milligram of THC and 25 milligrams of CBD, and then just ramp it up until you see an effect. A feeling effect. And then we don't know what the anti-cancer dose. The only data we have, I think that was, what did you say? It was 25 milligrams dose, something like that. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, it was that was a 40 milligrams CBD THC spread out over the course of the day. If I'm not mistaken, it was in that ballpark.
And then we have a woman with pancreatic cancer who takes 1,000 milligrams of THC every day rectally. Right. And she's not high. Go figure. I mean, what this says is the therapeutic range is so wide. It's different from a lot of pharmaceutical drugs where, if you too little, too much, but cannabis, and everybody needs a different profile and a different dose. And that's the art of medicine.
Yes, the art of medicine. Josh and Kelly, same question, and maybe just to expand on what Leanna said, as far as different methods for taking the medicine in, so suppositories versus smoking versus the capsules.
I think what we've found is that I've always told people to start with a lower dosage, and I always tell people a time of day that I feel is really important, which is when we've relaxed, our day is over, we've already eaten, we've already digested. It's sort of a time when we come into our body and we start recognizing, like, if we've taken something, we can actually feel what it's doing to our body. So I always make the recommendation for people when they're first starting out on a medicine to take it in that evening time before they go to bed, so they can really get a vibe for what it is that they're taking. We start with a really low dosage as well, 25 milligrams, probably a CBD. And our caps are up to, 90 milligrams per cap. So, we're telling people take one and at night and see how it works for you. We've done a lot of different dosages and seem to feel really good in this one right now. This has only been happening for us for about 4 months, maybe 5 months, 6 months now since COVID. And we've had a tremendous amount of people reaching out with curing symptoms that we haven't heard about before. So with a little bit higher of the CBD, it's interesting. So I guess, it's all trials and tribulations. But again, we're starting out with a really low dosage. Then we're increasing that dosage. And again, with our 90 milligram caps, we're telling people to take a half of it if they're for a child. But really, people are having significant results by just taking one in the evening and really never looking back.
And I totally agree with everything, the recommendations that have all been made. And I think it's just it's knowing, what your intention is to, in order to dose, to get a proper dose for someone. Are you going for corrective medicine? Are you trying to, and Dr. Sunil talked about this, I think was, do you have cannabinoids in your system already? Some people that are really never had cannabinoids, in their system and don't have and function happening, it can hit them pretty hard. It can be
sensitive.
It can be very heavy. So where it does make sense to have a bit of a higher a CBD in the beginning. But I feel, and you may agree with this, that after a few days or within by the time you get a week to it, and you could bring it up a little bit throughout the days that you start it. By the first week, you usually have a pretty good base cannabinoid in you. And for corrective change, we've seen pretty high doses of our hemp and CBD make some pretty amazing changes in fourth stage cancers.
In a short period of time. And as far as what kind of ways to ingest it, smoking is incredibly helpful for nausea. It's incredibly helpful for something that can sort of help with an immediacy. If somebody is feeling like a lot of anxiety and they don't want to be maybe high for a long time, maybe they can use a smoke. If they're used to utilizing cannabis, they can use THC in a small smoke because it won't be lasting for a whole lot of hours. So I've seen just a little bit of a vaporizer, whether that's a CBD or THC, because it doesn't last as long. It's a good way to sort of help mitigate an immediacy, somebody who's needing immediate help. So, smoking's been good for that, but primarily, ingesting it, we feel is
really
healthier.
Amazing salves right on tumors topically or right on ailments is another really good transdermal way of getting medicine in, and you can get pretty good relief, especially from a high THC salve. You can get really quick relief into the skin transdermally, and that really works well.
Yeah, and we love to utilize that emu oil for that, to cross that blood-brain barrier. So it's a wonderful uptake for the cannabinoids instantly. I mean,
And
really,
you mentioned the magic butter machine, so it's really easy to make your own
I love
butter.
that.
But you can also get a little machine called the Extract Craft, and it does small amounts of cannabis on your countertop and makes cannabis oil out of it. And it just puts it right into a little jar, which is also easily administered by yourself through, a glass syringe or something. So cannabis oil is a lot more potent and is a little harder to get your dosing right. But go ahead, and that's a lot for now.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. Such great knowledge here. And I can just see within our Facebook Live messages that people are very appreciative of this discussion and the amount of information that's coming through. Josh, you mentioned the endocannabinoid system. I want to pause and touch a little bit upon this because even 4 years ago, you guys have had many years of a relationship with cannabis. But for me, it really started 4 years ago with the start of the Cannabis Hemp Conference. And for me, I had no idea. I had no idea that we have a system within us and we actually have endogenous cannabinoids. So cannabinoids that our own body creates. And so the phytocannabinoids are one thing, but the endocannabinoids that are within us are another. And we want to increase our own production and our own access to them. Now, this is recent. It was only in 1992, and I want to acknowledge Dr. Mechoulam and Lumir Hannes from the University of Jerusalem, in Israel, and all of the research that they've put out and really spearheaded this, the medical side of cannabis. And so it wasn't until 1992 that Dr. Lumir actually discovered that anandamide, one of the first endocannabinoids, was discovered and hence led to the endocannabinoid system. So maybe we can start with you, Sunil, if you could touch a little bit based upon it and tell us, now that cannabis is really coming to the forefront, is the endocannabinoid system talked about more within the medical field?
Yes, and I just remembered you had Lumir Hanus speak at your cannabis conference a couple of years ago in Vancouver, which I attended. I remember that. Isn't that right, Salome?
It was incredible to have him come all the way and represent the university and the research. Yes, good memory.
Yeah, that was incredible. I mean, they did pioneering work. I mean, I think there's a lot to say about it in the brief time. I just want to kind of give folks some basic thumb points and then like places they can read more about it. But Vincenzo De Marzo, who's another major researcher from Italy, had put out this kind of really short, pithy statement about the endocannabinoid system's role in homeostasis for humans, and actually not just humans, like many organisms that have the system. He said it's relax, eat, sleep, forget, and protect. Relax, eat, sleep, forget, and protect. Those are the functions of our endocannabinoid system in a sort of simple way to put it. So helping us sort of relax. So balancing the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. Eating. We all know cannabinoids have this phagic. Give you them munchies, help you eat when you're undergoing appetite loss. And that's part of the natural systems. The sleeping cycles. Sleep is a very complicated process. Multiple areas of the brain are involved, but endocannabinoid system, if it's out of regulation. There was a study inpatient study in Chicago, Illinois, where they showed that if you dose people with THC pills, their sleep apnea improves by like many breaths per minute. Just as a controlled study. So there's significant changes in sleep when you add cannabinoids. So endocannabinoid systems involved in all forms of sleep disorders. Forgetting. So the forgetting is really important in trauma, right? So you might have to forget, and just also normal life. You can't remember everything that you come across, otherwise you won't be able to consolidate and process. So cannabinoid system helps you forget things, and then of course trauma. You have to be able to forget certain traumatic events, but not like a wiped out the memory, but just the emotional, aversive emotional connection that keeps you functioning. And then protection, and that's protection's a lot of what we're talking about here. Protecting the brain from injury, protecting our cells from getting too big ahead of themselves, too much division. So these are some of the practical physiologic functions of the endocannabinoid system, and it covers a lot of ground in a simple way. And there's just I can give you a bunch of other medical terms for it, but I want to recommend one paper by a guy named John McPartland, and it's open access, and it's called "Care in Feeding of the Endocannabinoid System: A Systematic Review of Potential Clinical Interventions that Upregulate the Endocannabinoid System." You can just Google and find it. It's in the Public Library of Science, and there's also the NIH researchers at some of the major institutes. They have papers out that say the endocannabinoid system is involved in likely every major human dysfunction, like disease dysfunction. So it's a big topic. And, there's a wonderful documentary that was called The Scientist by an Israeli filmmaker. It shows the life of Raphael Mechoulam. I've forgotten the name of the filmmaker, Zach something, but he says very clearly in there that if we didn't have this drug war politics, this is like Nobel Prize worthy discovery in biology. Is this level of complexity and this ties into evolution and so anyway, that's and the cannabis plant taps into that system, and I don't want to take up more time about that, but I just wanted to let everyone know that's the connection. Cannabis is 37 million years old. But the endocannabinoid system is like 600 million years old in evolution, so it's much older.
Can I add something? As a physician, finding my way with helping patients with cannabis therapy is a lot of my patients with cancer are older and have no cannabis experience, never smoked pot in college or anything. And so what or I have patients that say, oh yeah, I smoked pot in high school and I hated it. And it made me feel paranoid and stupid. So what I've done, I'm really asking, like, if someone says that smoking cannabis makes me feel stupid and paranoid, what I've been saying is, well, maybe that's not the right plant medicine for you. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think most often I've found that people who get couch lock and who might have a lot of anxiety or heart racing from cannabis is unfortunately a toxic cannabis product. Now that we have more testing in the field, a lot of people who had a bad experience with cannabis, unfortunately, they might not have had a bad experience with actually cannabis, but the other additives that were either pesticide, fungicide uses, and that's definitely something that we've been doing social studies for years and years. So I've been a migraine sufferer my whole adult life, and if I even touch anything that has a pesticide or a fungicide and isn't grown, with regenerative practices or in soil, that has some kind of a toxic compound in it, I'll immediately get that feeling of a migraine coming back. I'll start to feel the nausea. So I have a lot of compassion for people. In not only smoking toxic flower or, even though a flower can pass testing, then you go and you concentrate it. Well, that concentrate might not be able to pass testing. So they might have only gone as far as the flower, and we're finding a tremendous amount of, parts per billion of heavy residues. Metals, different types of toxic residues. What does that do to our functioning? I think it's totally hand in hand. And then the other thing to sort of address that you were saying is definitely strain dependent. So some people react really differently to a heavy myrcene. Although myrcene is wonderful, it's in that old strain of like where a lot of the Afghan came from. Back in the late 60s, we were seeing like those purple sort of blueberry strains, has a tremendous amount of myrcene. Myrcene is great for inflammation. It's wonderful, but it also gives you sort of that couch lock feeling. It's not the best for people who might need a little bit more motivation in their healing or a little bit more spark in what it is that they're doing. So they might find a little bit of a low sort of depression from it. Whereas another example is that, the high terpinolene limonene, really high THC, can really help people feel like they're in tune with what's going on with their healing, that they feel like they're finally in the driver's seat of their healing, and they feel really sparked on by what it is that they're getting from the cannabis. So, I mean, I can't go on
I
and
would
on more.
add
Their first experience is so important.
I would
Josh.
add that, that's why the type 2 cannabis is really a very powerful medicine right now. And the type 2 is just where you find equal parts, say, CBD and equal parts THC. So, and of course, all the other cannabinoids too. But a type 2 generally refers to, say, 10 to 12% THC, 10 to 12% CBD. That's a really healing combination. It doesn't hit you intoxicating as hard. I would just address really quickly that there's an emotional component too, and a spiritual component towards being able to take the cannabis medicine. And sometimes you could say to that person, trust in not feeling well for a few days and just kind of smoke or go through that a little, not to harm yourself, but you can build through and get through that sort of threshold of getting cannabis medicine and where it doesn't feel good. And generally, again, a week into it, you might have broken through not feeling good with the cannabis medicine. But then again, in saying that, I also agree that it is an herbal medicine. Not all herbs are meant for everyone. And it can be that, and maybe at this time in their life, that plant medicine, isn't healing for them.
And I just really quickly wanted to touch on what Josh said, which is just so important, is this fear of uncomfort in our culture. It's like the pharmaceuticals are trying to cover up the uncomfort. We're trying to, do meditation for uncomfort. Well, we learn through pain and through uncomfort better than any other type of thing that we experience in our life. So we're always trying to talk to patients like, what can we get out of this uncomfort? Where is it that we can find these massive lessons in the pain? Where is it that we can find direction in our healing? And like I said before, take control of our own healing patterns. I just think that, is sometimes cannabis is a little bit uncomfortable at first, but if people sort of work through that, we've seen massive openings for people, both on a spiritual, emotional, and physical level.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful answer, all of you. And Leanna, I so appreciate you bringing this up because, again, in my experience as a therapist, this medicine, just like all the other master plants, like ayahuasca, like San Pedro, like the fungi, they amplify the emotional, spiritual parts of us. And we now know more than ever in medicine that the body is not disconnected from those areas. And I would even go back to say that first it's awareness, then it's our thoughts, then it's the emotions that the thoughts create, then it's the behavior and the actions that we cause in our life, and then it just goes back again. And so what cannabis, I feel, is so powerful in doing is bringing everyone to a pause so that this internal world can be amplified. And so oftentimes when individuals who are working with cannabis say to me, like you said, I get paranoid thoughts. I say, absolutely. Okay, let's, like Josh and Kelly were saying, let's see where your medicine is coming from. Is it from a clean source? So let's first check that out and make sure that there aren't any contaminants in it. Let's try a different kind of cultivar, right? Let's go down a little bit into the CBDs. And then from that point, let's talk about what paranoid thoughts you are having. Let's talk about it. Let's journal about it. And it's just like a meditation. Cannabis is a forced meditation in many times that will make you look at those parts of your life, like Kelly was saying, that are uncomfortable. And we need to hold people within this discomfort of isolation, which is loneliness, and lack of control. So I would love to hear, Sunil and Leanna, what you do, because I know your clinic, which I had the honor to come and visit recently, is a holistic integrative clinic with therapists, with consultants, with different modalities for healing. And so please tell us a little bit more when someone does come in with anxiety and depression or some of these ruminations. How do you deal with them?
Yeah, absolutely. Just before I answer that, I want to just say one thing about this issue that we're talking about with paranoia. In the clinical trial that Donald Abrams did at UCSF for cannabis and inhaled cannabis for HIV-associated painful neuropathy, the patients in the placebo group, those who got cannabis with no cannabinoids in them at all, it was inhaled, grown on the farm in Mississippi. That's the only cannabis he could use for the clinical trial. There was a certain percentage of them that reported paranoia. So it's very interesting. Paranoia happens, it has nothing to do with the cannabis itself, but the context in which, in our society in which we hold cannabis. So you can amplify it just because it's still a Schedule I drug. Many people can't even cross the border between the two countries that we're talking in right now. With if they have cannabis in their, some people got Googled out of Canada and stuff like that if your name is associated. Or those kind of stories. So there's still like a big stigma issue, and I think people like tap into some of that vibration, when we're dealing with it. So talking to people about those laws and how they can protect themselves is also really important. I think as part of the harm reduction, and then also the not using it, the volume, turning up the volume, but maybe making it so it's not so loud. Because some people really need to kind of go gently and not inhale maybe a slower onset or a topical or something like that. So anyway, so I guess let me just answer your question about we're like an integrative, we call ourselves the AIMS Institute, Advanced Integrative Medical Science Institute, and we specialize in oncology, psychiatry, neurology, rehabilitation, pain, and palliative care. And so we have like all of these, we have specializations in all of these, like doctors and therapists who are experts in these areas, nurse practitioners. So patient may start with any one of us, depending on what they're looking for. And certainly in the patients with cancer, Dr. Standish is who patients start with, or some of our other senior residents who are training in naturopathic oncology. We have a certified training program in what's called to achieve a fellowship of the American Board of Naturopathic Oncology. So it's a formal process. And so anyway, patients would start with one of those doctors and really we'd get their records from other doctors that have treated them. And maybe Dr. Standish can go in a little bit detail on how patients come, how you start those, and how you make where they go from after you see them.
So, at AIMS Institute, the reason Sunil and I started the clinic is so that we could do something that I have never been able to do anywhere, which is to actually do integrative medicine. And what does that really mean? I mean, it's a great buzzword right now. What does that really mean for us? It means it's integrated like mind, body, spirit, right? They're that way, east and west integrated. And then, for example, a cancer patient will be referred for medical cannabis education. I mean, it's tons of education. And then they will be given some suggestions about what products and what route and what milligram of this and that. And then that patient, if it's an advanced cancer patient, we're using blood tests now for circulating tumor DNA that can give more targeted therapies. That's part of our system. But I think the most important thing that we're doing is that we now know that cancer, the risk of cancer, is associated with the number of adverse childhood events. That's been well established. And so if the cause of cancer is partially trauma, then if we're going to try to cure cancer, we have to go back to the trauma. Well, the only therapy that I know that really addresses severe PTSD is psychedelic therapy. And so Sunil, with his leadership and pioneering work, started ketamine-assisted psychotherapy. So a cancer patient would start with Sunil, and have a discussion about ketamine and how it's used and the science behind it. That person would be medically screened to make sure it's safe for them. And then they would be assigned one of our psychotherapists who are trained in psychedelic therapy, either with MAPS program or CIIS and other programs, the ketamine program that Dr. Wolfson has created and others. And then that person will do psychotherapy to prepare for the ketamine assisted psychotherapy session, then come back another day. We're doing intramuscular injections mostly, sometimes lozenges. And then the person will have a anywhere from 2 to 3 hour full on psychedelic experience, and then follows up with the psychotherapist for integration. So integrative medicine has to have integration with the psychedelic thing. And one of the programs that Sunil is trying to start here is to have cannabis assisted psychotherapy. I mean, there are people who have never really relaxed in their whole life. And it's really hard to do psychotherapy on someone who has never had that feeling. I remember the first time I experienced cannabis, I felt like, oh my God, I finally feel okay. There was like a real experience for me. And a lot of people have never had that experience. So, and they're afraid of it, for all the reasons we just said. So, the clinic where there's integrated cannabis, integrated ketamine, integrated biology, plant medicines, mushrooms, medicinal mushrooms, astragalus, all those things that we mentioned. And then other things I probably forgot.
Yeah, I mean, and then I'll say you did exactly right on. I mean, the other thing is we're also integrating other non-therapist licensure trained doctors into the psychedelic assisted therapy space. So like naturopathic physicians who are well trained in mind, body, spirit assessment and basic skills of, supportive therapeutic. A lot of this therapy work is really inner-directed healing. So bringing people back to, just like we were talking earlier, like, let's go into what it is that's coming up rather than, okay, prescriptive. It's more like supportive. And so that's the other thing is we're trying to integrate different types of practitioners, not just mental health professionals, into the ketamine assisted psychotherapy work. And we're also trying to do that for sicker patients who can't come to the clinic in their homes. And so that I have this palliative program that I'm trying to pilot, and even patients on hospice. I want to try to reach them as well so that they have a way to approach this kind of care when they're facing their own oncoming soon death. And then Dr. Standish's leadership, we helped design an IV therapy program with really all kinds of advanced therapeutic supports, such as ascorbic acid, vitamin C, intravenous curcumin, intravenous quercetin, a whole range. We were trying to get intravenous CBD actually, but couldn't find a preparer. So if you guys ever find anybody, let us know. But sometimes you really the key thing with these medicines, when you're in these advanced stages, you've got to get enough dose into the system, really. And the IV system is generally the best way to do that. So that's another track that patients can go on and get that care integrated. And then sometimes they need to do ongoing counseling, to process things. And so they can see therapists. We have a doctor that does physical medicine and rehab in a very integrative way as well. So, that ligament that's frayed, that's really, ruining your shoulder function or your back, your ability to sit upright. Is there a way that we can do prolotherapy and strengthen that ligament, put sugar water in there and tighten and get the system to sort of wake up and heal up the old scar or the old tears? Perineural therapy, which is where you try to rebathe nerves that are chronically like neuropathic or injured from chronic constriction. Can you kind of wake them up? So we have that approach as well. So I didn't mention Ayurvedic medicine. There's a few other, people can go look at our website, but the idea, AIMSInstitute.net, the idea is to try to have under one roof, a few of these different options. And then we all sit together once a week and talk about our difficult cases of patients that we're referring to each other so that we can also integrate as a team. And we do really try to keep the mind, body, spirit approach. So, and there's a lot of comments here about costs, and we're very sensitive to that too. I saw that we try to take all major forms of insurance as we can at our clinic, including Medicare. and whatever we can cover, we will cover. But a lot of our things are considered experimental, and the insurance companies don't want to pay for that. So we try to do is what we can. We try to create some funds as available. We're now in our second year of doing this thing, and we're excited to collect our data so that we can maybe hopefully change the share it with our peers and change the minds of insurance companies.
Wow, fantastic. And again, it's for me, it's both sad and inspiring. It's inspiring because you have taken a huge stand. And I know just by talking to you, Liana and Sunil, there have been so many red tapes and so many boundaries that you've had to break to be able to even offer what you do as far as the insurance, and then offer the ketamine and offer the post integration, and the team that you have brought together, and still within a country where, in the United States, where federally cannabis is still illegal. And so that is inspiring for me. And then on the other side, what makes me sad is that these clinics are not everywhere. And this is not the model after all these years that we're following. And I know in Canada, and maybe Josh and Kelly can speak a little bit to this, unfortunately with legalization, we did take many steps back. And these clinics, even though some of them are starting to come through, it's not the way that you guys have created it. And so I hope that, with the community watching this, that more inspiration will come through. So I'll pass it over to Josh and Kelly. Please share a little bit about, what you're hearing as far as what's happening at the Ames Institute and what happened in Canada in regards to legalization. And then we can pivot towards the cultivation discussion.
Yeah, I guess first of all, the work that you all are doing at Ames is leading so much. There's so much to follow. So, the integrated work that you all are doing is, I really truly believe, holistic and integrative, more so than many other clinics, even around the world, that may be taking a lot of different therapies into account. So that's huge. You all are really making waves for so many people to be able to follow. As far as what's going on up here in Canada, Salome, you definitely coined it. With legalization, they took away medical access for patients, and that would be all patients. So that was all concentrates above
10 milligrams.
10 milligrams became illegal. We didn't really even, aren't allowed to talk about it. So before, people were allowed to go to dispensaries and they would get a whole beautiful download about all of the strains, what it's helped people with. Maybe this particular variety that came in this week is really helping people with depression or people with anxiety. So there was more of a conversation around it as a medicine. Now the conversation is around it as a commodity. So we've changed the focus up here in Canada from it being a medicine to it being a commodity, which I think is incredibly unvaluable, and it's disraveling a lot of the work that's been done in the cannabis realm up to this point. So, it's a really contentious issue right now up here in Canada with people that are trying to gain access to even cultivation licenses, what they're offering in the cultivation realm for people to be able to enter as a processor, as a cultivator, as a distributor is, you have to pay to play. It's $1 million+ to have licensure. And then once you get that licensure, then your beautiful medicine that you might have taken 30 years of soil recipes and of love and intention and saving all of those beautiful strains to get medicine to the people, then you put it into the market and it becomes irradiated. Now, we haven't done a whole lot of tests on beautiful probiotic flour that's been properly, cured, as opposed to flour that's been irradiated and mishandled from the very beginning. So really, I don't think that we're talking about medicine for the most part in any part of the Canadian cannabis market, unfortunately, as far as it goes to the end consumer. It's great because it has opened up, with the federal legalization, there's a little bit more money and funding in research and development. That's really awesome and wonderful, and it's opened the eyes of a lot of other countries of what's possible. But as far as being a person or a community member, a part of this cannabis culture and a part of the cannabis industry, it's very sad what has happened here. We have a really long way to go.
I would just add that there are some progressive elements to what's happening in Canada, and John Conroy is a really wonderful lawyer out of Vancouver that has helped with medical access, and so the medical access is still continuing in the area. I mean, in Canada, I would say, and we are seeing a lot more plant medicine retreat centers, you know, happening around, and you know, we saw you last at the Sentinel, you know, here in the Kootenays, and there's so many more, and psychedelic associate this, even this Canadian Psychedelic Association, are all signs that there is still progressive people afoot, and we just are still in a way we're still fighting for that of being able to heal ourselves. And I think that the cannabis legalization is not legalization, it's cannabis regulation, and it has stripped plant medicine out of cannabis. And so it's very important that we stand up for compassionate medicine, and also you know, different products, because they initially only legalized, you know, flower and pre-rolls. So that took a tremendous amount of products off the shelf when it became legalized. And Vancouver, you know, for example, Vancouver, BC was one of the most progressive places, you know, anywhere in the world for different products and even case studies and general access. So access is compromised. Packaging is also killing us. The way that the legalization has created packaging around it. So those are some of the big things: the microbials and irradiation. Those are things that have been a difficult road for us. That we don't see this as an end. We feel we're still in an evolution here in Canada. So thank you, Ames, you know, for giving us language up here and giving us, you know, there's collaboration with MAPS. There's a lot of collaboration between the US and Canada. I think it's just up to us to continue to blaze the trail and just not be afraid and stand up for human rights. And that's what we're doing right now, because we don't have the access we're looking for yet.
And I think also, you know, the one main positive thing is that cannabis is making her way into regular homes. She is making her way into regular conversations. So by federal legalization, it took a little bit of the stigma away. So people who are in their elderly years can say, oh, well, hey, maybe that's something that I want to try. And then the cannabis plant has an ulterior motive, which is to bring in all of her buddies, which is all the other plant medicines that are really riding on her. A lot of people are now seeing that medicine can come from plants. She's introduced the world to this idea that we can be healed by plants at all. And it's also giving people language like, hey, wait a minute, now pharmaceuticals are actually made from concentrated plant entity, like a lot of that. So it's really leading us into more conversations about how, you know, our evolution with plants and healing can go well into the future.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much to both of you. I know you were both very involved in Health Canada's, you know, initial task force discussions, even around pesticides, herbicides, what was allowed, what wasn't allowed. And now to see, like you said, these massive licensed producers, these massive companies who are growing cannabis in a mass way, and not always doing it in the right way. And because of the money component that this, you know, incredible plant has, they're just releasing it, and like you're saying, radiating the medicine. And that is not medicine, you know. And so before we go to the cultivation talk, I just wanted to add this part, that what happened with cannabis regulation in Canada is it did strip a lot of people who were on the front lines of their work. And I remember going into some beautiful dispensaries, like Kelly was saying, in Vancouver, where there was a dialogue. And now when you pick up the phone and you call the LPs, you're not Like, you will not get somebody on the other side of the phone who will be able to speak to you about the medical side of cannabis. That is a massive loss to what took place. If you go into a dispensary, you cannot even smell a plant because everything is now, again, glassed up, caged up in plastic. And so, the discussion continues. I want to honor John Conroy and all the work that and the lawyers who have done in this regards, because it is a human rights case. And with the other psychedelics, right now, as you've heard me say on the CPE many times, I, for one, am not for legalization anymore, because the same pattern will continue to happen with psilocybin. And what we want is decriminalization so that people can have access. Like Liana was saying, this is about safety. Many people still do not feel safe to use plant medicines, and this is a shame because it has come from the earth. And so safety is a major piece. And from decriminalization, we want to go into supportive communities, just like the decrim movement in the US, where the police force and individuals who have been providing the medicine within their own scope of primary care and circle of care and best practices will be speaking to the police to assure that this safety is met, and that people can come and experience psychedelic work and healing with cannabis in a very, very supportive, integrative way. We're pushing for this. And so legalization for me really was a loss. And so I want to pass it over to you, Liana, and Sunil, regarding some of the updates in Washington. And then we'll come back. And I know this is such an amazing discussion. I see the questions and I want to have time for cultivation as well. So Liana, Sunil.
I just want to ask a dumb question. Is it illegal to grow your own plants in Canada now?
You can grow 4 plants, and that is the case all across Canada, unless I'm wrong about that. Provincially, that may be different in some places, but four plants. So
we still also have a medical system through Health Canada, which they've been trying to do away with, but we have what's called the ACMPR program. So that's still alive and well, and physicians are still signing prescriptions for that. So that is something that people can still grow their own under a license, as well as not under a license, therefore.
And so it is powerful to talk about making your own medicine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Here in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Sunil. I'll just say, Buckminster Fuller said, build a new system that makes the existing system obsolete. And that's what we're talking about here. And it's that old system will shift because we're the ones that will serve the needs more. We hope. So as far as what we're doing in Washington State. We also had a process of losing a lot of the artisanal aspects and the community aspects around medical cannabis after legalization in 2012. And then there was the state legislature passed another bill that kind of really tried to merge the medical and the legal systems together. And that's when things really shifted. And a lot of patients felt that they lost access to varieties that they were using, to more of the community side of things, the cost of entry, to the economics of it became more onerous, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that that's still going on. There's been some small reforms here and there since that's happened. We did legalize the ability for adults to transfer cannabis between themselves. So they had this commercial system where you could buy it, but you couldn't actually legally give it to somebody. So they would write about, oh, well, that means like, a married couple can't exchange cannabis and things like that, or whatever. So all of that did get changed like 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and it's actually like those things allow cannabis educators and people in our community, the healers, to sample. You can actually pass things, and that's allowed under the state law. Growing is only restricted only to those who have a medical license. We're the only legalized cannabis state that doesn't have the right for growing for all adults, which is unfortunate. Like Colorado, California, Maine, you name it, they all have the cultivation rights. So we're working on that, and there's still the taxation issue is very high. The cost of cannabis because of the excise taxes, we're trying to get patients to be at least exempt from that. So there's still so we have an adult system, we have a medical system. The adult system is still very there's driving laws are still not very good. Anyway, it's an ongoing. People like John Conroy, we have our versions of those attorneys down here too. Folks like Douglas Hyatt and the HempFest and groups that are really trying to keep up on this and make it out of the corporate model. I mean, some of the cannabis major companies in Canada are owned by people in Seattle, and it's very interesting how these issues are actually interconnected, and we're dealing with the same issue, which is this hyper capitalized model that doesn't pay attention to the human needs. And I mean, it's unfortunate because Canada innovated in so many areas of health. Actually, my field, palliative and hospice care, and even pain, a lot of these models came out of Canada. There was leading doctors who established what it means to have how to assess for quality of life and how to assess for chronic pain. So I think Canada needs to find a way to bring and the BC Ministry of Health was very ahead of the game with harm reduction, beneficial psychoactive substance use as part, drug use as part of the spectrum. So there's a lot of great models that I think are there, and hopefully there's a way we can get some of the financial things out of it. It's basically a monopoly game. So the more we can kind of break that monopoly, the better, more access. That's why they want to narrow access for people. So you have to go through certain channels. So anyway, we have to prove safety for that. And that's why we have to have these kind of associations. So that's the update from Washington. My 2 cents as well.
Thank you.
I would just add that there's some really beautiful work happening from Hiller PC, which is a law firm out of New York. And everyone should look up Hiller PC. And they're doing some really amazing work right now with descheduling cannabis federally in the United States.
So very quietly, they've been working on, looking at the unconstitutionality of it being scheduled as a plant, even at the very beginning. There has been an appointment accepted by the Supreme Court. There's a lot of things happening right now. It's sort of this quiet, powerful movement that's happening over in New York with some senators in different states that are going to help push that through.
Congressman Earl Blumenauer is one person. But.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. That the courts are as long as the courts can get judges that we like, because that's a whole other politics with the appointments of judges here. But definitely all fronts.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that update. Liana, do you have anything to add as far as what's happening in the States or in Washington specifically? Okay.
I think you're on mute, Liana. You might want to.
No, Sunil is the expert. I have nothing more to add.
Okay, thank you. Very good. So now, as we know, medicine needs to be medicine. I can't say it even more clear than that. And so Josh and Kelly, I know you've dedicated your life to this, and you have created a certification program, organics cannabis certification program that now you have expanded not only in BC, but across the West Coast of the United States. So please tell us a little bit about that program. How many farms are currently registered under it, and how did this even begin?
So, in the late 90s, as cannabis was becoming medicalized in California, and we started to see the care happening with cannabis. And we, were growing up here, and we were connecting with the cannabis plant. We were, the more research that you do, and that you learn about it, is it's a sentient being. I mean, the more that you grow with this plant, you realize, wow, this is a powerful being. I mean, it's an adaptogenic master plant it's forming medicine as we're breathing together. It's creating its matrix and its fractal medicine while we're breathing together. And I find that, I feel like I need to respect that evolution, and I need to respect that. And we were seeing the recreationalization the regulation of cannabis coming in, and we were seeing more dispensaries open up early in the medical era. And we were recognizing that there was no standards on the cannabis that was going into the dispensaries. And we recognized that we visit a lot of farms always. And so we know what people use. And at that time, there was no organic standard, no a national organic program for cannabis. So cannabis in the beginning was potentially very toxic. And we know that it's like I said, a dynamic accumulator. It accumulates the toxins that are in the environment, and that can compromise our immune system. We know that we have a microbiome in our immune system that's, it's sensitive towards toxins, and in the daily life that we have, we're generally taking in low dose toxins. And so this cannabis plant can help us rid those toxins. And so we wanted to create a certification that was really based in plant medicine cultivation. It wasn't a certification that was product based, where an organic certification allows you to just list out a bunch of products, and if they fit their criteria, then you can use them. You can use plastic mulch in your fields, which are single-use plastics that are bad for our environment, and you can use plastics which are generally bad. So we just really wanted to create a certification that was essentially a lifestyle certification, but also brought in the importance of food and land use and flower and taking your farm as a biome. So we wanted to use cannabis to save the environment, and we wanted that healthy environment to then save our biome. And that's where the Pure certification came out. And we were one of the original cannabis certifications. It was based in Oregon and Canada. But now it's not just West Coast. It's in Colorado. We're in Michigan. We're in Maine. We're in Europe.
Switzerland.
Out in Switzerland and Thailand. We're communicating with regenerative farmers. We're communicating with the awakening family on Earth that are saying, you know what? No matter what it takes, I'm creating a natural system. Heal my local community. People like Dr. Neil, Dr. Idra are creating, and also, warriors in their local community that are doing it for things are bad. So we wanted to be a positive. Well, to be current, now we have, representing this message. It's not just to us. It's not a Dragonfly Earth Medicine message. It's a message of DEM Pure. It's pure medicine. It's farmers out there. You can look it up on DEMpurefarms.com and see a list of them.
Also, I think that the focus, as cannabis is starting to make her way into, regular households, is that cannabis is good for you. And the message is cannabis is good for you, but nobody is asking what is good cannabis. So that's really important. We can talk on and on and on about how cannabis is good for you, but if you're getting toxic cannabis, then it's absolutely harming your immune response, and it can actually be causing more of the maladies than we're trying to cure. So we can't just say across the board, all cannabis is good for you. So we created our certification really out of frustration, as well as a lack of other certifications, a frustration for the bastardization of the term organic, that the term organic no longer serves us, and it certainly doesn't serve farmers who are having stringent testing that food farmers have never had before. So they could be adding OMRI certified or organic certified amendments, or be following all of the standard operating procedures that is allowed for the federal standard, organic programs, and they could still be failing their flowers.
They could extract for Dr. Sunil, and it would not pass the test, and that would not be okay.
Right. So, our number one goal is that we feel like we can truly save the earth with small farmers producing plant medicines. And the only way that we can do that is to keep small farmers in business. So for small farmers to be able to continue to have, high yields, good crops from year to year, they have to be able to pass those tests. So our regenerative certification is that if they are following our standards and our closed loop practices, then it's not even going to be a question whether they're going to pass the test, but it's also going to be that they're going to be producing a much higher medicinal flower, as well as, you know, a much higher vibrational medicine for their consumers.
Mhm. Excellent. Yeah, I know how much work has gone into this just by seeing you guys at different events, the tours that you take. You both show so much love and care by going to the actual farms, by constantly being, available for the questions and answers. And you have really created an incredible web of support and community. And so I had the beautiful honor to come and visit you guys on your farm. So I want you guys to share a little bit about this biome. I love that Josh, mentioned that the farm is an extension of our own biome, and the cannabis plant is a biocarrier, and it does to take up all the toxins. So whatever is around, it's going to take in. And so when we came to your farm, we saw that these incredible plants that were much higher than me were sun grown. They were connected to the other food network that was on your property, and you have a closed loop system, which nothing, if I'm understanding correctly, nothing comes from the outside. Everything is within the system. So your teas, your fertilizers, the plant waste matter, and they were the most beautiful plants. It was a jungle that I've ever seen, and there was not one dark spot on any of the leaves, just beyond belief. So please tell us, how do you make that happen?
It was really important to us in the very beginning to create natural systems to farm like nature with nature. And so, we recognize that we may be possibly in a mass extinction. We know we are losing organisms on Earth. So again, we wanted our farm to be a positive impact on Earth. We know that there's dead zones in the water, and that one of the largest, contributors towards death in the waterways is from agriculture, or even climate change. One of them is agriculture. So if we can affect the way that agriculture is being done, both in the backyard and a large scale, then that was very important to us. And we also recognize that the food system and saving the seeds were all compromised systems. And so on our farm, we've created a fully integrated system where it's like a food SD, we're created sequestration farm. We don't burn anything on our farm. We bury wood, everything in earth. We see our plants as a conduit that's connected, and it's got all of the things that we've created, which is all from local raw materials. So our property, we don't use any commercial products bought from the store. In fact, we create products for stores. And so what we have on our property is an intelligent Appalachian mindful terroir-based living soil system on our property, and we're creating superfoods alongside with super medicine. And it's an integrative system. And again, all of the farms that we represent in the Pure certification are doing this, and we're seeing our farms as, an example of how to save the world, how to live in harmony, and not just have medicine for us, but provide an environment to create that environmental medicine that we need. We know that we're only as strong as the environment around us, and maybe instead of human beings, we're humus beings, and we have to have, conscious humus and intelligent humus around us in order to function properly. So we keep those things together in our mind as we build our property.
And Salome, you touched really quickly on, the microbiome. We need to recognize this microbiome as a higher intelligence. We know that mitochondria runs every single cell in our body, that we are part of nature. We are natural, beings. that, you know, a tremendous amount of weight in our body is from living organisms that have their own colonization and their own death process. Some of these microorganisms inside of us are incredibly beneficial. Some of them are very pathogenic. And unfortunately, with a lot of the toxins, as well as a lot of the stress emotionally and physically that human beings are feeling, is that not only are we losing a lot of diversity on our planet, but we're also losing a lot of diversity in microbiology. A lot of our beneficial microorganisms are, you know, going away because of the toxic compounds that we've been either putting into our body or putting into our environment. So yeah, we do. We look at our farm as a healthy microbiome because we're working in a soil which we're creating a healthy microbiome in the soil. Then as we're working with the soil, then we're ingesting and we're working with healthy microorganisms that we know are only present in the soil. When we study a lot of maladies, you know, having to do with schizophrenia, having to do with a lot of COPD, you know, all different types of digestive issues, you know, irritable bowel. I could go on and on. We're seeing a devoid of beneficial microbiology that we can directly trace back to soil. So we really feel like our health comes from the soil, not only our physical health, but also our emotional and physical, you know, our emotional thinking biome. So the more that we ally with beneficial microorganisms with the soil, the more capable we are to make better decisions about our future. And then we also have to start integrating that the cannabis plant has its own microbiome as well.
It's synergistic.
So it's synergistic with the soil. So how can we raise the diversity of beneficial microbiology in the endophytic system of the plant? That happens through making healthy decisions of our own healthy microbiome. And then that expands out to the universe and its healthy microbiome, into communities with its healthy microbiome. So it goes on and on.
And really quickly, living soils provide endophytic fungi and endophytic bacteria, which are outside of cannabinoids and outside of terpenes. And those living endophytic fungi and living endophytic compounds are part of the plant blood. And it's a newer, you know, it's a newer awakening towards medicine right now. So living soils are extremely important.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much. And I know we will absolutely do another webinar based on, you know, a larger context and a larger conversation around living soil and how important it is. I appreciate everything that you guys have said. And just following Dr. Zach Bush, he talks a lot about the living soil on our planet dying. And he says that this is, you know, the soil on top of our planet are the lungs. And so our lungs are not functioning. And when the topsoil is deteriorated, then a CO2, which is actually a lot more of it, is captured through the soil. We think it's the water, we think it's the oceans, but it's actually a lot comes through the soil. And so that actually increases more of the CO2, and the capturing is not done as well. So it's a fascinating topic, and I 100% agree with you guys that we are facing an extinction. But we have a chance. I really feel, from the visions that I've seen, as hard as they have been, I feel that there is a potential for us to transition into a new way, a new earth. And I've shared this with Liana and Sunil as well, that in an ayahuasca ceremony, the medicine shared with me that survival is enlightenment in our time. And so the more that we can come to the place of rest, to the place of ease, to the place of going through our childhood traumas, clearing those up, clearing our addictions, living in harmony with our surroundings, the more that we have a chance to live and survive and be of impact and be a positive impact. So it's just so wonderful that you guys have taken that stewardship and have helped so many of the farms. Before we go to the questions, please give us a bit of an update of how the farms. Liana, please go ahead before I ask the question.
Well, I just am sitting here um, astounded by the idea that Kelly and Josh have just given me, is that the psychedelic medicine movement is, we many of us think it's going to save the planet, but here's a whole new level, is growing psychedelic plants in the way that you're talking about is going to change the soil. I mean, I didn't get that, and just what you're talking about is going to be critically important for when ayahuasca comes to North America, and she's coming. She's here now, and she's going to come legally eventually. And the way that we grow these plants is critical. So thank you. That was just a great speech that you guys made. Thank you.
I just want to also say that amazing what Josh, you and I just know you as Dragonfly Earth Medicine. I don't. That's just, that to me is what you're doing is so you're getting right into the earth, like into the deep relationship of our being to the land. And I just think and you're moving that out into how we do medicine, how we think about our relationships. And it just came to my mind, this Satish Kumar, he's a writer. He has this, let's get out of the liberty, equality, fraternity, and even mind, body, spirit. He says really the Trinity is soil, soul, and society. And he has a nice article in The Guardian 2013. He has a book on it. And it's just like, this is really where we should be looking at: soil, soul, and society. So,
one of the things that we say often is healthy mind, body, and soil.
Yep, that's our little go-to phrase there.
Thank you so much. And Leanna, I know I discussed this with you before the call, but maybe this is a good time for you to share your stewardship of the medicine on Big Island, and maybe share with us a little bit of the journey of how you're helping for the mother plant, the ayahuasca, to come into the research arena.
Yeah. I had the marvelous experience of drinking ayahuasca in Brazil, in the Amazon basin, more than 20 years ago. And after I had that experience, I just became so fascinated by everything having to do with ayahuasca. And Terence McKenna and his then wife, Kathleen Harrison, and Dennis McKenna, and others, Luis Eduardo Luna, had brought plants from Peru and planted them in Hawaii, where in a tropical rainforest, where to protect them and study them and cultivate them and grow them in a sustainable, organic way. And so those plants now are 45 years old. And I have the honor of taking care of them and growing the ayahuasca in a sustainable, organic way. And eventually we're going to need standards like you guys have for ayahuasca. So we should be collaborating before it comes. And I think psychedelic plants are going to rejuvenate our agricultural communities. I mean, there's such a, and then when you're around these plants, and I have sat quietly in the rainforest where the ayahuasca plants are growing, and if you do it enough and you get really still, you become aware of something that's called plant intelligence. And most people in Western culture are completely hold on, I have to let my resident in the clinic. Hold the thought, I'll be back.
Sounds good, Leanna. And Josh and Kelly or Sunil, do you have anything to add while we wait for Leanna?
I just wanted to say, Josh, you did mention, and Kelly, thank you. I forgot. I couldn't remember your name there for a second. It was the first time I'm meeting you. I wanted to say, you mentioned even the word recreational earlier, and one of the thoughts I'm trying to get out there in the world is really just recognizing that I think recreation, whatever that is, it's a very deep part of our need to be alive, and that's it's part of the spiritual well-being, because we're all going to die. So if you can't recreate yourself in the moment, what are you going how are you going to make it in the world? And so, it's much attention you make to medicine for healing, knowing that recreation is an important part of our healing too. It's honoring the farmers who are giving us that medicine, and pushing back on the idea that we don't have to be as careful with that kind of medicine. That's all.
Leanna.
She asked me, Leanna, to say something while you were gone.
No, I'm just having this insight about how agriculture is and psychedelic medicine is unified in a way that I just didn't get, and I keep saying the same thing again. So thank you so much.
Beautiful. I'm so excited to seeing how this all unfolds, as the medicine and the plant intelligence, as you said, really connects us and brings us to a place that we all know what we need to do for the next steps. So
I should say that with this medicine that Dr. Sino is talking about, ayahuasca, the idea is to actually bring it before the bodies that regulate what we're allowed to put in our bodies, as medicine, which is FDA, and to do a study to actually show that, and that's and how to process it in a way that's respectful of the traditions, but also the certified ways that you have to do that to make things into products to bring into a medical setting, to how to protect the patients that would go through this, whether this can help for cancer patients. We have so many questions, and she's opening her work with ayahuasca is going to open that up in a big way, and it's been I think a 10+ year journey from learning about it to actually trying to study it, and I'm very I don't know if you want to say anything more about that project, but it's very bold.
Well, the thing here is our goal is to get ayahuasca assisted psychotherapy approved by the Food and Drug Administration, and our vision is that ultimately Medicare, which is the public health insurance program in the United States, will cover ayahuasca assisted psychotherapy, and that's our vision. And so this, in the same time, this decriminalization of nature is happening, and I see them as completely complementary. I don't see them as either or, but both and. So it's a very exciting time, and the FDA consists of good people, smart people who really believe in protecting the American people. And the FDA has been wonderful to work with so far. And so we're working towards it. And we hope to, as I say, do the first phase 1 clinical trial at Ames Institute. And Dr. Agarwal will be the physician who signs off and is the prescribing physician. But our goal is to do this in a group therapy session using the best of traditional methods, the group therapy model. We can talk more about that another time, but I just want to get to the questions before we lose too many people.
Yes, that sounds great. Is that okay with you, Josh and Kelly? That we go? Okay. So let's see. Here we have a question that says, I have always wondered how THC balances out all the cortisol released by using cannabis, leading to relaxation. So cortisol, they say that THC raises cortisol levels. This means you may not feel as relaxed as you might expect. You may even feel paranoid. Prolactin, THC lowers prolactin. What would you say for that, for the cortisol levels?
Well, I can say that we measure morning cortisol level in many of our cancer patients who are using cannabis. I don't think we know I don't think medicine, Western medicine knows the answer to the question, but I have not observed a cortisol problem, either too high or too low, that's associated with cannabis therapy. And maybe Dr. Agarwal has something, or you guys. What do you guys think?
Well, there's been some studies where they have done cortisol swabs. I believe in Colorado there was a study, and Washington State University has been doing work showing some of the stress relieving effects that people talk about and correlating it with reduced cortisol, salivary cortisol levels. So I think it's it's just is a phase. Things can go either way if you take too much of anything. So it's certainly possible that it could raise cortisol, with some of the over responses. I'm not sure about the prolactin. There was a while ago in the 70s there was a propaganda that using cannabis would cause men to grow mammary, breasts. That was that was one of the myths that was out there, and presumably that was debunked, and so it's not raising your prolactin to that point. So I don't know. Just that's all I know about that topic.
Really good. Thank you.
I was just going to say that, we're not studying levels or anything like that of cortisol, but, cortisol, I'm seeing a huge reduction in visible of what I would consider, heavy cortisol production and what somebody looks like when they're on a lot of cortisol. I see people utilizing cannabis and, there's that really relaxation. So it sort of goes against, the idea of what THC offers. I think that if you're going to be having anxiety, then it goes back again to that feeling, is it the THC that's giving you the cortisol, or is it an emotional response to a memory or some kind of a feeling that you're happening that, that's going on that could be releasing that cortisol?
Very good. A question about the daily use. That potentially might lead to a higher THC amount. The person says, yeah, let's start with that one. What happens when people have a higher tolerance?
I just want to say my experience is that people do, pharmacological tolerance does happen to THC. But the thing about THC is, as I said earlier, it has such a wide therapeutic range, so that it's not dangerous. And as I have patients that take 1,000 milligrams a day of THC, and I have patients that 1 milligram, puts them to sleep for 12 hours. And maybe other people have something to add. Other people have other things to add to it.
Yeah, receptor desensitization has definitely been observed in functional imaging studies in the brain with heavy users, and there's definitely, this kind of a lot of studies, and I did look up. There is some cortisol spike issues in what they call chronic or heavy marijuana users, and some of the the published data. I don't know how well controlled those things are. Unfortunately, a lot of those data sets, you kind of collect some people that say, "Oh, I've been using it every day for this long," but there's so many variables that go into that. Like we were tying. If you are doing that all the time in a state that's not really legal, how much is your daily stress level having to navigate the legal system? The same thing happens with the youth. So a lot of those issues are tied in. It's hard to disentangle the social stress of looking for cannabis or dealing with its use. And I do think that chronic use will blunt your cannabinoid level. So that's why you have to resensitize your receptors. Dr. Dustin Sulak in Maine, he's an excellent cannabinologist, and he has great videos on healer.com and on YouTube on how to kind of resensitize your receptors. And cannabinoids are really nice because they slowly leave the body. So it comes in fast, but then it slowly, because of the lipid storage, it slowly withdraws. So you don't have a big on and off. So the body sort of gently lets it go, and that reduces some of this. But if you really push it hard, you'll definitely get desensitization, and you'll have to reset.
Great.
And certainly in tumors, if we're talking back to cancer, we see mutations. Even with many treatments, that's why you have to mix it up, do different types of therapies, because tumors do mutate and try to build resistance if you're trying to use cannabinoids to fight a tumor. Isn't that right, Dr. Standish?
Yeah. And what I've heard from my patients is that if you abstain for 3 days, that is often enough to reset the receptor so you're more sensitive. That's what I've heard out there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Kelly and Josh, maybe this is one that you can speak on. A community member has asked, in Canada, many concentrates are allowed, several carcinogen chemicals up to 5,000 ppm, such as butane and even benzene. This is a huge concern for me because I don't want to be vaping toxic chemicals. This is why I stick with solventless concentrates. How dangerous is 5,000 ppms to the human body? Does Health Canada or the CDC in the US even know for sure where cannabis vaping is concerned?
I think that we need to be really careful as consumers as to what we're consuming. I mean, that just comes bottom line. If it's a butane extraction, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that would disagree with what I'm getting ready to say. But, when we're starting to test it parts per million, it's coming up clean. When we're testing parts per billion, there's really not a lot of butane hash extractions that aren't coming up with some types of toxic compounds in it. So I think it's really important. What is your concentrate being made out of? Yes, that person is very intelligent, whoever you are, to stick with ice water extraction. That's a much better way to do it. Also, like coconut oil extraction, olive oil extractions. There's so many different recipes online. You can go to lots of different CBD websites that have, a breakdown of how to make your own. And you have to be really careful on what it is that you're toking on. I mean, it just seems like every person out there has got a vape pen. They don't even know how it's made. Is it a petroleum, based product? Is it PHO, which is propane? Is it BHO, which is butane? Is it hexane? All of these things are really quite toxic. So they put them into the flower and then they take it out by a purging process. And really, I feel like if something's being put into a flower that you need to take out, maybe you shouldn't be smoking on that concentrate.
I would just add, as far as vape pens, it's what everything Kelly said. It's also the actual metal, that the pen's made out of, and vaping has come under a heck of a lot of scrutiny lately, and there's a lot of markets that were primarily vape pen driven, but you're finding nickel and different heavy metals coming off of the actual the metals that are coming out of China. So vapes, there are companies that are searching for non disposable metals and stuff like that. So vape pens are a problem, and rosin and solventless extraction, ice water extraction is a really clean way, and it's probably the most sought after thing at the moment in the market, as far as a hash goes or something.
And also know your grower. That's why we really encourage people to make your own medicine, grow your own medicine. What a wonderful opportunity to commune with this plant, to be able to grow it from a small seed and be able to have that daily interaction with that plant. We've been evolving with this cannabis plant all the way to the point of that we have an endocannabinoid system that's with us. So we are also evolving as cultivators with this plant, that it has an understanding of what we need. A lot of people are even talking about, maybe just being around the plants every day and having a talk with it, that they're harvesting that medicine, and that medicine is going to be the absolute best for all of their different maladies and things that they have going on. So there is a spiritual resonance that comes that is unexplainable through
just
science.
Being around the ayahuasca or being around the cannabis. Japanese have forest bathing. Maybe we need ayahuasca vine bathing.
Yeah.
Along with ingestion.
Sign me up. Sign me up.
I want to just add, there was 39 people that died in the U.S. from what we called vaping-related lung injuries. It was over a 4-month period. There was a big, last year, there was a big, many thousands of cases were reported, and then several people did die. And it turned out they think it's all related to something called vitamin E acetate, which was an additive or maybe used in the solvent preparation in some of these both tobacco, nicotine things, and also some cannabis vape products. So it just gave everyone like a heads up, like this is not, you can't just sort of buy anything out there. It really needs to be made in this clean way, and these petroleum byproducts do have are known to be pro carcinogens. It's true, benzene. There is a nice paper from the Harm Reduction Journal a number of years ago that showed that even when you smoke cannabis, you do get benzopyrene and things like that just with the smoke, but it's not equally carcinogenic like tobacco, and we think it's because the cannabinoids it sort of stops the conversion to carcinogens in the liver and doesn't have nicotine in it, which is pro-carcinogenic. There's a bunch of it's a complex chemistry, okay, is what I'm trying to say, but you don't get all that with the vape because the vape is really distilled down. So I think it's better to avoid petroleum-based, products for vaping. And I agree with what Josh and Kelly have said.
Thank you so much, Sunil. Our other question is regarding CBD and the difficulty that it might be hard on the liver. And I just want to speak a little bit on this. So, when I work with my clients, when they're going through whatever mode of medicine that they're using, we start right away with the body first. So making sure that they get on the alkaline diet, that they, start to reduce their meat intake, if not completely, that they take out all of the sugars, that they bring, their body first into homeostasis as much as they can, beginning, and then introducing the medicine into even more clean environment so that the uptake can be stronger. So please share about CBD being potentially hard on the liver, whether you've seen this, and also the protocol for fasting or cleanses when you do work with people with cancer. And maybe Leanna, we can start with you.
Well, I'm embarrassed to say that I've heard a rumor about CBD being causing inflammation in the liver, but I have never seen it. Is there actually any science about this? Sunil, you guys, what do you think?
Yeah, there is science. It was observed in the studies of Epidiolex, which is again another pharma high CBD type 3 cannabis CO2 extraction. That's CBD tincture that was used in seizure disorder children, and they used very, very high doses. I mean, we're talking like 1,000+ milligrams a day of CBD. They would use anywhere from 5 to 20 milligrams per kilogram per day. So if children were like 40 kilograms, you can just do the math, how many thousands of milligrams we're talking about in a day. And that's where we did see some liver enzyme, what we call transaminitis. ALT, AST are these markers we check in the blood to see if the liver cells are being injured, and then they were. And when they dropped the dose back down out of those stratospheric zones into better lower zones, like I was telling you about the 1 milligram per kilogram, or in those lower ranges, it was, then things got back to normal. So I've seen, and this is a problem when patients are taking other medicines that potentiate with the liver. We see this with a medicine called clobazam, which is a seizure disorder medicine as well. So you do have to pay attention to liver metabolism, liver injury in CBD when you're in the very high dose range. And that Epidiolex is a very purified CBD. It's still botanical, but they lose a lot of the other fractions, and so I think that's why they're pushing that so high. Is because it's so it doesn't have the synergism of the entourage as much.
Also, I was looking at that study as well as, sort of all the talk when the FDA came out with some of the ruling and how they were going to move forward with THC, Delta 9 counts and all of that sort of stuff, is when we started seeing that being, everybody was having a conversation about that case study. But one thing that I wanted to mention that, it really isn't talked about is when you start to go such high doses in CBD and other cannabinoids, inflammation is also a healing response. We see inflammation in when the body is in a possible healing response. also. So, what kind of, ailments is the possibility that CBD is releasing? What type of, possible unbeneficial microbiology? We know that, that is also comes into play, that there's also like a more balancing and homeostasis with the microbiome with cannabinoids. So what is releasing in the body that may also be causing
Could be
that
a
inflammation?
detoxification.
So I just don't think that it's enough for us to just say, oh, let's just blame it on the CBD when we're not looking at the whole picture of healing that went into that. So that's my point.
Fascinating. I didn't even think about that. Absolutely. And the
Really,
liver does regenerate. It's one of our regenerative organs, just to let everyone know, you can cut a part of your liver off and it grows back. It's like, it's our tadpole, tadpole thing.
really great point. Thank you so much, Kelly. In that regards, thank you so much, everyone, for all the questions. I'm going to take one more because I'm mindful of the time. This is a specific one for pancreatic cancer. Someone is asking for the cancer protocol, dosage, CBD, THC, and have you seen success with it?
Well, it's too early to say. We have a handful of pancreatic cancer patients, all of whom, if I think this is correct, are getting some kind of cannabis therapy. And I don't know yet. And as I said earlier, I think what most of us at Ames Institute would do is to start a patient off on symptomatic control. Many pancreatic cancer patients have digestive issues, just really severe digestive issues. So start using a high CBD, low THC product and work with it. And we won't know. I don't think we'll know for years what the right protocol is. I don't think anybody knows yet. And then there was another question there from I think the same person about what medicinal mushrooms. There has not been a lot of research, clinical research on pancreatic cancer and mushrooms, but every gastrointestinal cancer that we treat here at Ames Institute, we start with turkey tail mushroom. And the dose there that is 3 grams a day and 2 divided doses.
And I think that I would like to just chime in here a little bit is that, there hasn't been enough case studies. Josh's father died of pancreatic cancer. We weren't really able to treat him until, the last month of his life. So it was very symptomatic treatment for him. And it really was very helpful for a lot of, the pain that he's experiencing, not only just physical pain, but also emotional pain. So that was really helpful. But again, as far as the curative is concerned, I really just want to keep interjecting, that medicinal mushroom, cannabis, compounding, the two of them working together to help heal these ailments. And like, you all were saying, there's not a lot of research in this, but there's just something very intuitive about those healing modalities working together.
So,
and I feel especially for pancreatic cancer.
Yeah, my dad had a really hard time. I think that, suppositories kind of make a lot of sense for a pancreatic person because of the digestive issue. My dad definitely had cannabis oil, and that he was able to get off all of his pharmaceuticals towards the end. And it was really an aha moment that he had towards the end, which was really too late. But it was still nice to see an aha moment going off at him where he recognized he could have maybe taken care of himself better. But I would just say that the best chance that you have is just the old term heroic doses. Like, pancreatic cancer is a vigorous, hardcore thing. So, if I'm looking back at what we could have done is just maybe once they're built up to it, just as high a dosing as possible on the medicine that works for them
to help with his symptoms. And I know that Josh is also saying that really quickly is because we have been treating animals, we have been treating people for many, many years. Our black lab here, she was I think 9 or 10 years old. She had tumors all of a sudden within a month's time all over her entire body, and she was, obviously in a lot of pain. So I started treating her for pain with THC. Pretty much, what I would call heroic doses, meaning, just enough that she could get around, she could pee, she could eat. Within 6 months of her just sort of feeling okay and feeling good, 6 months later, every single tumor was gone in her body from these heroic doses of THC oil, as well as she lived another 7 years after that. So,
and that is about your disposition.
And I'm not saying that's a cure-all, and I don't want everybody just going out and just doing that, but there is, some advantages of treating symptoms very drastically, and that also turning out to be a curative in the end.
Amazing. And thank you so much. Our furry friends also need the love and support, and so good to hear that. I want to give a shout out to Jasmine, who is here with us. She's the co-founder of the BC Compassion Club, which has been going on for over 20 years. And they have a model that's, I would say, is holistic in some ways, where they have the apothecary, where you can access all the other herbs and medicinal mushrooms. They have a massage therapist, they have acupuncture on site within the same, and they offer a lot of support to some of the most marginalized communities as well. And so I just want to honor all of the cannabis activists and advocates and educators. I think when cannabis affects you in your life, kind of like Liana was saying at the beginning, when she first felt that moment of safety and relaxation, just something within us, within the social network of this plant, makes us want to give back and to support. And I really honor all of you for dedicating your lives to this movement and the service and the support. So before we leave, I just wanted to get a little bit of an update of the farms, Kelly and Josh, and how our community members on the West Coast are doing so far as the fires. And is there any way that our community members can support?
I noticed that Jasmine put up a note that her center was the Wellness Center. So I think people can look up the Wellness Center. Thanks, Jasmine. The fires are actively happening right now. And we have family in Mendocino that just recently, just had a fire line built on their property. It's really hard right now to know how to support people because it's so unbelievably widespread. And the fact is, even in Washington, there was a million acres burnt in a week or somewhere around there, and whole towns lost. We're working on, we have ways, maybe how can we get people there's GoFundMe accounts that we have to specific farms that we know that have lost farms. People could email us that, we have put it up on our story and in different ways, but we need to come up with a website that gives all the proper ways to help and support the fire victims.
And one thing that I wanted to say is that, within DemPure, we, our 100 plus farms, as well as another 200, maybe businesses, organizations, individuals that are educators, people that are all really believing in this movement of regenerative agriculture, regenerative medicine, all of this. So what happened was any one of these farms who were having impeding damage, fire coming towards their farm, we had quick action network. We had like 8 trucks. We had trailers. We had farms that all of the animals could go to. So I think the real lesson out of this is anybody who wants to learn more about it and help out, they can definitely go and follow the hashtag #DemPure. But I think what we continue to learn, and we're talking today, is that we can't do it alone. We now have this wonderful opportunity as cannabis is making its way out there. We're all being able to see each other in the light for all of the work that we're doing. And how is it, like one farm can't be on its own. We need to be able to support each other in the work that we're doing. We need to be able to support each other in our livelihood and moving forward. So with the fire is what has been able to spare all of our farms, is all of us coming together, digging fire lines, dumping 2,500 gallons of water all around the perimeters of the farms. It's togetherness that is saving this farm. It's togetherness that's bringing this medicine forward. It's togetherness that is helping unlock, the answers to our true health and our true ascension as human beings.
And really quickly, cannabis farmers are a bit of the redheaded stepchild still, because when fires happen, like in California, they'll let people from wineries back on their property. They'll let ranchers back on their property, but they'll stop cannabis people from going back on their property. Even licensed and recreational farms will not be allowed back on their property because they just don't treat them the same way. So in a way, as outlaw medicine makers that we've always been, we are now seeing we continue to have to create our own network.
We're still feeling that stigma.
We have our mycelial network that we're using to act for each other. And right now, I'd say the actions are still happening. I'd say the dust is not settled yet. And once the dust gets settled, we'll figure out ways to create auctions and different ways of awareness. So that's what we can say right now. Just keep your eyes out, and you'll know people, and if you can help them, they need it. Some people got out of their house with 2 different socks on and 1 t-shirt and lost every single thing that they ever worked on.
And because they're cannabis farmers, they don't have the same kind of insurance that's allowed for any type of other homeowner.
And we recognize there's psychedelic mushroom farmers, and they're medicine makers of all types. So
Wow. Thank you so much. And again, because of the network of 100 plus farms, at least there was mobilization. And I keep getting that message. We need to mobilize, because these things are probably going to happen more and more so, unfortunately, in the next couple of years. And like you said, as the dust settles, we'll have to, as you guys being leaders, to let us know what other measures we can take. And so for community members who are watching this and want to reach out to Kelly and Josh and see how you can support, even if it's $50, even if it's $100, it goes a long way when so many of us come and help. And these cannabis farmers are giving the medicine globally, if not just in the States. So we are so grateful. Closing comments. You guys are all amazing. I can't believe how rich this discussion has been. And I know all of you guys are tired. This has been a long day. You carved out such precious time for us. Thank you so much. So maybe Leanna, we'll start with you for closing comments, and thank you again so much.
Yes, thank you. I just feel so inspired by the connectivity of what we're talking about here in psychedelic medicine. And my hat is off to you medicine makers. Thank you so much. And don't stop what you're doing.
And right back at you. You all really complete, the work, and you make it available to the people. And without, people like you, it makes me emotional. I feel very connected to you all, even just from this conversation. And I'm just really appreciative of you. In closing, I just like to be thankful to the whole community, because again, we're on this panel, but we're all one part of this web, and it takes all of us to truly make the change that we're looking for. So many blessings to all the people that want to make change out there. Many blessings to the people that are making change. Thank you, Salome, for your elegance and your beauty. We appreciate you. Dr. Sunil, thank you so much. We appreciate you. We really look forward to spending some time with you and Leandra. And thank you so much, everyone. Leanne.
I just wanted to say, as the web gets wider, which we are feeling this incredible widening of the web, a web cannot get wider unless the weave gets tighter. So we are becoming a wider web with much tighter weft, and that is really incredible.
Thank you so much. I love this mycelial network going on here. These analogies, it really helps us understand how we need to grow. And thank you so much, Salome, for making it possible to meet these master medicine makers, and for your leadership to bring us together like this, and the CPA. I also want to thank Allison Drazen, who's a psychologist who works at Ames. She's the one that had the idea, hey, let's bring Salome into our HempFest panels this year on psychedelics and spirituality. And then Salome happened to be in town in Seattle, and then we was able to meet us at our clinic, and we talked about this panel. And it's just like all these kind of webs and interlinking. We're all connecting, and it's just, it makes me very grateful and hopeful, because I know that that's what it's going to take, because part of the whole situation has been the destruction of some of these webs. And so we get into our individual silos. So I'm grateful to share, and I look forward to doing more work to get collaboratively with all of you. And thank you for those out there. Contact us at amesinstitute.net. That's our website. And we can do some remote education as well.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you all so much. And to everyone who's watching, thank you for your service and support. All our medicine holders, keepers, thank you to the lineages. I want to honor the lineages that have held, especially Mother Ayahuasca, so strong with us. And we're so grateful to have this medicine up in the north. And cannabis, the mushrooms, San Pedro tobacco, all of the medicines within our environment. If you would like to connect with us more, please reach out to us, become a member of the CPA, and your support will help us to create more webinars, more discussions like this, more synchronicity, as Sunil was saying. And thank you to Allison as well. And as we continue, as Kelly was saying, to deepen this weave, because even when we're connecting like this, and more of this will happen, we are not isolated. We are connecting on much deeper levels, even on these planes and on the other planes as well. So keep up the great work, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Okay.